So good afternoon, Derbycon. How you doing here in track 3? Wow. I bet it wasn't like that at 9 a.m. this morning, was it? You get a greasy burger in your system, soak up some of that water that you drank last night. Yeah. For those of you that are used to seeing me speak or seen me done it before, I'm usually pretty animated. Don't expect that too much today. I hurt myself this morning, and I'm actually in a whole lot of pain up here. So I'm going to do my best to be as animated as I normally am. But if I fall or something like that, yeah, you know why. Old service injury. But here, you're in a talk called Burping. So you could probably imagine it has something to do with Burp Suite, considering I'm in the AppSec field. I deal a lot with that. And it's for joy and financial gain, because I promised I would never give a talk that said for fun and profit, and I couldn't really think of a great title, so I'm trolling myself a little bit here. All right, so who am I? Tim Tomes, also known as lanmaster53. That's typically my social media persona. Husband, father, veteran. Write some code. You guys may have played with tools like ReconNG, Honey Badger. So I got some scripts and stuff out there that are somewhat useful at times. I enjoy open source development. I enjoy writing code. Been doing it a long time. So I consider myself a coder. I'm also somewhat of a breaker. I've been a pen tester for a very long time, network and application security wise. Just recently, last week, started my own company. I'm a one-man show doing some freelance stuff under the name of Practical Security Services. Thank you. Everyone that clapped now has to sign a contract with my company. So, all right. So I'm also a teacher, independent instructor. Some of you may have taken Practical Web Application Penetration Testing. It's an application security course focused on learning Burp Suite and the process of conducting pen tests, kind of giving you the confidence. I'm sure there's some folks in here that have taken it if you're interested, but it is a Portsburger preferred training course for Burp Suite, so I do some of that on the side, and then I'm a sharer. You know, you've seen some of my blogs. I get up here and I talk, and I really enjoy sharing my passion. And I do all of it because as a Christian, it's really these things up here is what I believe I was created to do, and so I take a lot of pleasure and great joy in serving out my God-given purpose. And I wouldn't be telling you who I was if I didn't include that. So the outline here today. Thank you. You are here, right? Not just here, but also here in the outline. Go through some disclaimers. We'll talk about some boring stuff that you probably already know, right? So give me about 10 or 15 minutes to get going. Some of you might pick up on it. Some of you it may not be useful to you. Don't get up and walk away, because then we'll start talking about some things that might catch your attention, right? And then towards the end, I'm going to talk about some things that are fairly new to me, that are probably new to you. I haven't seen too many people do anything with it, and so I think you'll walk away with something that you can use on Monday, and that's really my goal. Okay, and hopefully you'll walk away and be able to produce some level of joy or financial gain in your lives. So, let's move forward. Disclaimer, some of the stuff is really basic functionality that most people are already aware of. And I say most people because I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't stumble across it at some point and go, wow, I wish I'd known about this at some point. Okay, so it's there in Burp, not necessarily obscure, but perhaps we just don't think of using it in certain times when it may actually help us out. Burp may already solve a lot of these problems in other ways that I'm not going to solve them here. If you know of different or unusual ways or other ways that other functionality that Burp has I don't cover here that solve the same problems, by all means, shoot me an email. I have a project where I keep a collection of those types of things, and I'd love to take that information and share it with everyone that uses that project. Because some of you may have better ways to accomplish these tasks. And then just understand this is the way that I do things, right? It's the way that I teach my class. It's the way I give most of my talks. It's just I'm sharing my experiences. And so your experiences are bound to be different, and that's okay. Just trying to help out with some of the things that I've encountered. So the first thing I want to talk about, and you guys can make fun of me and tease me all you want, but you can actually rename tabs in Burp Suite, right? How many people here knew you could do that? Aha, there's only like 7, 8 hands up, right? Right? Now, you may not think it's all that important, okay? But I've been involved in some situations recently, particularly where I was testing SOAP web services, where you may have a SOAP web service, you parse the WSDL, you have a ton of operations in there. And when you start pushing those over to Repeater to test them, and I'll demonstrate it here in a minute, there's not really a whole lot of information within the SOAP request to kind of tell you what it's about. And so what you're left with at the end of the week or after you've imported all these SOAP web services is a bunch of numbers, right? Tab 1 through 35 or whatever it is, and really no way to kind of go back and see where you've been or what those particular tabs do. And so I found and it was a complete freak accident, accidentally clicking on one of the tabs and it highlights, and I was like, can I actually type there? Sure enough, you could type there. And so I started I named all those tabs, and then from that point forward, I knew I could get back, how to get back to where I wanted to be. And so, just to kind of demonstrate that for you, not only to show you it happened, but also to set up a future demo, we'll go over here and we'll look at something. We'll look at an example of this. So there's an application called PwnTub here. This is a test application I wrote to demonstrate pretty much everything I do in AppSec. I just add new stuff to it all the time. It's also what I teach PWAPT off of. But it is open source. Actually, the source is available. It's not technically open source in the sense that you can take it and modify it, because the license says, hey, I use it to make money, so please don't, right? So you can use it for your own personal training and all that stuff and demonstrations, and the code is out there. But this is a sample app we're going to use. And I've got a SOAP service here. Right there, right? We get a what is a 405 response saying we invoked it improperly, and that's okay, because they are self-documenting web services, and we have this thing called a WSDL. Is Eric Gruber in the room by any chance? Nope. Okay, Eric Gruber from NetSpy wrote this really, really nifty burp extension called WSDLer, and it was broken for a while, but he brought it back to life about a year and a half ago because I begged him to. And basically, what it does is when you go to a WSDL within your browser and Burp is aware of it, you can go to your proxy history here. You can right-click on the WSDL file and you can say parse WSDL, and it'll parse it. And under the WSDLer tab, you'll have a list of the operations and the bindings within that SOAP web service. You can click on those, and you have the wonderful little sample request that most of you probably have used SOAP UI at some point in time to create, okay? But now we can do that all within Burp. We right-click that, send it over to Repeater along with its other 34 brothers and sisters that would normally be in the SOAP service. And if you wanted to remember what you were dealing with, well, we just come up here and Tools, Info. And it's that simple, right? Very, very not intuitive. Like, I had no idea I could do that. But you can do that, and so now you can take that forward with you as well. I just click it. I mean, it may be a double. Yeah, double. But if it's a single click and you click twice, you'll probably get all right. I'm thinking it's still going to work for you there. All right. So I'll just invoke this service once properly to kind of prep for a later demo. Okay. So the next one is Grepping from Intruder. All right. So who here has ever used the grep extract rules in Intruder before? All right. Another decent show of hands, but not nearly as many as should. Okay. So Intruder is great for a whole lot of things, right? Specifically for fuzzing, right? It's a fuzzing tool. That's what we use it for. We use it for fuzzing. But we can also use it to conduct authentication attacks, right? Username, passwords, or just user enumeration vulnerabilities, stuff like that. But sometimes it's really, really nifty if we can actually extract data from our fuzzing attempts. Okay, this would do a lot of great things. It would augment our authentication attacks in that if we're trying to extract, say, password security questions, which we're going to talk about here in a second, or password reset security questions, we would be able to then use our fuzzing attempt to go back and parse information out of each response. Or if we're exploiting insecure direct object reference vulnerabilities, we could cycle through thousands of integers or whatever it is, direct object references over a period of time, and then just extract data from all those responses. I've actually seen people write extensions just to do this, right? And go through all the trouble of writing Java and integrating it with Burp and so on and so forth, just to extract stuff from responses when that stuff is already built in there through these grep extract rules. So let me show you what this looks like. Here in PwnTub, we have a vulnerability in the forgot password page, where if you type in, say, fake user, and you hit submit, it says, hey, user not recognized, and most of you probably see where this is going at this point in time. But if I type in an actual username like Tim and hit submit, it says, hey, answer the question, and here's a security question. Now, this certainly looks like an in-band password reset system, okay? And this is bad. We all know it's bad, but I see it all the time. Wouldn't be in here if I didn't. And so in this particular case, maybe we have a list of 5 usernames. It'd be pretty easy to go through and parse out those questions, but what if we had a list of, say, 30,000 usernames that we wanted to bounce off of this thing, and then extract this particular question for them? And then we could take that question, go back, do some open source intelligence, and then maybe answer some of those and get further along in the process. An actual attack that have played out against Fortune 500 companies in the past, and it works. Well, what we can do here is to kind of go through with this attack. We'll go to our proxy history where I just made that post with the username, and we'll send it over to Intruder. Now within Intruder, we go to positions, and obviously the only thing we're interested in here is the username, right? So let's clear the rest of those out. And then within our payloads, we can put in some usernames that we know exist, and we'll just do a kind of a fake user. And then we can use Tim, and then we can put in admin, and then we can put in hacker, princess, and maybe Cooperman, and some other things that may or may not actually exist because I wrote the application and put them in there. Okay, so we can do that, and then we can just go and run the attack. And where did it go? Thank you, Burp, for like shrinking it. All right. Did it actually do anything here? What happened? Oh, there it is. It's like really zipped up. Yeah, the small resolution really kind of goofed with it, didn't it? And we can sort by length here and very quickly see that where it determined it had them, right? So we know that Tim's a valid username, admin, hacker princess is, and I need to go back and reset something here because I think these are going to be resets. And I actually need to run this with redirects turned on. So give me a sec. I'll run that attack again. Turning on redirects. And of course, it's going to do this all over again for me. Okay, here we go. Same difference. Sort by the length. We can see that there's definitely a difference and there's something there. So if we go over to options, we have this grep extract panel here. And if we click add, we can tell grep to start extracting stuff out of these responses. And so one of the things I really love about this capability is if you scroll down to the thing that you want to extract, which is favorite food, obviously, as you highlight it, watch what happens up above. Burp builds either a string parsing rule set or a regex that will then go back and apply that to all of the responses and show you that input or show you that output in the table. So once you've done that, you hit OK. You go back to results, and sure enough, what do I have? Favorite food, pet's name, favorite food. So if I have a huge list of users, or if I'm going through a bunch of integers in an IDOR attack or something like that, I can tell Burp to go back and start parsing information out of this so that I can now extract information from those responses. Now there's a limitation here, and we'll cover it here a little bit later on in the course or later on in the talk, and talk about how we approach that issue as well. Okay? But awesome capability here. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is method interchange. So method interchange is a vulnerability where the application has implemented a verb-agnostic way to retrieve parameters. And so basically what that means is browsers typically talk to back-end parts of the application through a series of get and post. Now there's a whole lot of other ones. I'm not going to get super technical, but get and post is the two primary ways that web browsers make requests. Obviously in gets, the parameters are specifically in the query string. With post requests, they can be in the query string, but typically they are in the post payload or the HTTP packet protocol payload. Okay? So what the server's done, or what the developer's done on the server, is they've said they can either explicitly say, only give me parameters from the query string, or they can say, only give me parameters from the post payload, or the third option is, just give me a parameter by this name, I don't care where you fetch it from. Okay? And while that may seem like it's not that big of a deal, if you have a cross-site scripting vulnerability or a cross-site request forgery vulnerability or something like that in a parameter that's within a post payload, it becomes significantly harder to exploit that, right? You've got to use some sort of fairly complex JavaScript. You've got to get them to go to a place where that JavaScript executes or find another vulnerability in the application that you can chain with it. It's just not a very simple way to exploit that vulnerability. Okay? But if I can take those parameters and just move them to the query string and execute the same attack, I've drastically simplified it, right? Because now I just send the victim a link. I don't have to have any fancy stuff happening in the background. Just send them a link, a little bit of social engineering, they click on it, they're exploited. And so the ability to do that, when the developer has used that verb-agnostic way to pull down parameters, I call that vulnerability method interchange. And we need to be able to test for that within our applications. So in order to do that, you could just push a post request over to repeater, and you could change the verb, and you can move the parameters, and you could modify the content type. But Burp has an option inside a repeater to do that for us very, very quickly. And so I want to show you that. Okay. So place within the application that is good for this would be our profile. Tim Tomes, profile. This would be an ideal place to do this, right? So let's just prime Burp with that, which we did. I'm going to go into Burp. I'm going to close this Intruder tag. Go to my history, scroll down to the bottom, and this is the post that I want to test for method interchange, because it will be a heck of a lot easier to exploit CSRF against the profile page if I could do it with a GET request. So I right-click, I send it over to repeater. And I just want to replicate the behavior as a post. And I can see this here, and I can follow the redirect and see that the message is account information successfully changed. Now, if I go back to the original request, you can right-click anywhere on the request, and in the context menu is this option to change request method. Okay? Fairly simple. Click it. It does all the magic for you. You simply hit go, follow the redirect again in this particular case, and you can see account information is changed. So now we know that that particular post, that particular resource on the server is vulnerable to method interchange. We were able to test it very, very quickly. And now our attack has gotten a heck of a lot simpler. Okay? So that's method interchange. Okay, now this one changed the game for me. This is a game changer for me as far as someone who focuses heavily on manual testing but wants to leverage the power of Burp Scanner, because Burp Scanning Engine is really good, right? I think most of us that deal with automated scanners would say that, well, Burp may be a little bit harder to manage because it has more moving pieces and it requires a little bit more babysitting than some of the others. The scanning engine is top dog right now. It's the launching point or early adopter for pretty much all the new vulnerabilities that come out. James Kettle, who I believe is a researcher, I'm not sure what exactly his position is, but I know that he works with Portswigger. You know, he gives a talk about every year or every other year at Black Hat releasing a new web vulnerability and then releases the actual signature in Portswigger or Burp Scanner at the talk, right? I mean, you can't adopt it any sooner than that. And so they're way ahead of the game in terms of the industry and getting these things out. This has a really good scanning engine, but the wizard's super annoying, right? How many people have used it before? Going through, yeah, I mean, it's super annoying in setting it up. You end up with a lot of duplicate work because Burp may see the same request made, or a request made to the same resource 3 times, but each time maybe it had a difference in the number of parameters. And one may have 9, one may have 7, one may have 6. And there's a chance that you'll scan those 6 parameters over and over again 3 times, which is a lot of time, a lot of headache, a lot of resources, and it's just not all that efficient. And then, of course, with all automated scanners, it just may never finish, right? Automated scanners usually find a way to get tripped up, and they require a lot of babysitting, blah, blah, blah. Scanner select, insert here, okay? So wouldn't it be nice if we could leverage that scanning engine in a more controlled fashion, right? Decide where we want to use it and only implement it in that particular place on a particular set or an individual parameter. It would just be awesome. It would enable us not only to do very much more controlled scanning, but it would also enable us to scan in places where Burp may not have picked up a parameter even being. I've seen some wonky XML requests before where the content types weren't set right, so on and so forth, and when you export over to Intruder and it shows you the actual identified parameters in the request, it didn't find the one that you're actually injecting into because it got confused. So the scanner, if you had blindly gone through the wizard, wouldn't be scanning that one either. Okay? So we can force it to scan in places that it may not have identified through the wizard. And so I want to show you kind of how this works. All right? And we can do that with the SOAP payload we created earlier. So if we go to repeater, we'll go over to tools info, and this is what we want to scan, right? We've identified this. Now if we send it over to Intruder, we can see that it did the right thing and it did identify that being as an injectable parameter. Good for Burp on this time. Not always the case. But we don't want to go through the overhead of soaping this here or scanning this here or this there or the session or none of that. We just want to scan this parameter. So we can clear out the rest of these. And then if we right-click in the context menu of Intruder, we see this wonderful option in all of its glory, active lead scan defined insertion points. Okay? And that will launch the Burp scanner to scan only the parameters that we identified here, and that's amazing. Okay? If we go over to the scanner real quick, we can go down here and see it already found the SQL injection issue that exists there. And it's just a very, very fast, a very, very granular way where we can conduct controlled scanning. I don't even use the wizard anymore. As someone who focuses mostly on manual testing but really likes scanners to knock out the low-hanging fruit, as I'm mapping an application, I'll begin in my head to keep a record of all these places I want to go back and do this. And I'll revisit those areas and just scan the parameters that I think are interesting as opposed to just blindly blanket scanning the whole application. And I think it actually makes the Burp scanner much more powerful. Okay. So the next thing is TLS stripping, formerly known as SSL stripping. Most people probably think it's still called SSL stripping, but I'm changing the name, folks, okay? Because it's transport layer security, right? That's what we're talking about here. Who here's familiar with SSL stripping? Okay, most of you? Good, good, good. All right, so Moxie Modern Spike released it a long time ago. It was a vulnerability where basically the man in the middle brokers a half-encrypted connection between the client and the server, and is all based on the fact that web browsers by default, when you say like lanmaster53.com, it makes that first request over clear text HTTP, and then if the server wants to upgrade to HTTPS, it'll redirect the browser to there. And so a man in the middle that's standing in the middle can say, oh, you've made a request for clear text lanmaster53.com. I'm going to go ahead and upgrade that to HTTPS and send that request to lanmaster53.com. lanmaster53.com responds and says, okay, here's your content encrypted. And then the man in the middle can now decrypt that because he's brokering the encrypted connection and pass it back to the web browser unencrypted. And that's that SSL stripping. That's where that title comes from, or TLS stripping. So they're brokering that half-encrypted connection. And the benefit to this over traditional man-in-the-middle attacks on TLS is you don't get that, oh my gosh, you have to trust an untrusted certificate, right? Because that's what a normal or traditional man-in-the-middle would have to do, is re-sign it with an untrusted cert. But here, you don't have to do that. And so we want to test our applications for that. There is a protocol that was designed specifically to prevent that, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But we want to test for this vulnerability in our target applications. And Burp gives us a way to do that unintentionally. At least I think it was unintentionally. Okay? So PwnTab doesn't go over encrypted, so I'm going to go ahead and show you here kind of how it works. If we go to lanmaster53.com, and I'm probably, not connected to the internet or something? What's that? That shouldn't matter, right? I may not be connected to the internet. And you know what? That's okay. I can still show you the configurations. So the way that you would do that is if you go into your proxy and you actually go to the options to configure it, you edit it, and you go over to request handling, you can tell it to force SSL. And basically what that tells Burp to do is every time you see a connection, it doesn't matter if it's being requested over HTTP, you go ahead and upgrade that to SSL or TLS and make that HTTPS connection to the server. Okay, that solves half the problem, right? Burp is now upgrading. The problem is when everything comes back, it's going to have references to HTTPS links. It may have secure cookies on it or secure flags on cookies and so on and so forth. Well, we want Burp to strip those too, and we can. If we scroll down, there's an option to convert HTTPS to HTTP and remove secure flag from cookies. So if you set that up first, and then you go to lanmaster53.com, you'll see the page load, and then it'll load just fine, and the only visual cue to the user is that there's no longer a green lock or a green word secure, and SSL has been stripped off the connection. And that's what we're going to talk about here in a second. So, yes, there is. And if I don't answer that question, definitely ask me it again. Okay? And so, at this point in time, we've man in the middle of that. And I think that was where I was going with that piece. So, what this gentleman up here referenced was HSTS. Well, HSTS was a protocol that was designed to prevent this. And basically what it did anybody here ever use the HTTPS Everywhere extension? A couple of hands. And so the whole idea behind that is, hey, browser, don't ever go anywhere clear text. Well, I mean, that kind of works until you try to go to a resource that doesn't use it. lanmaster53.com is completely static. There's nothing active there. There's nothing sensitive, so I didn't always have it encrypted. You would not have been able to go there to visit all the wonderful resources had you been using HTTPS Everywhere, okay? So that being said, what HSTS does is it puts the power in the developer's hands or the administrator's hands, and they can now tell the browser for a set period of time, don't ever request me over clear text again, okay, for this particular period of time. But there is that first request that gets made from the browser to the server that gives the server the opportunity to send that header back. If the man in the middle is there for that first request, then obviously he can strip it and he can obviously remove that header, so on and so forth. But the odds of that happening obviously are pretty slim, right? You'd have to be there the first time. Not that it couldn't happen, but it could. But HSTS was designed in order to prevent this type of attack. And I think that's kind of where I was going next. Yeah, the concept of, yes, sir. No, but you could create it. He said, does burp have a way to remove that header? You could totally create one, right? In the Grepping or Grepping replace rules in the proxy. So, yeah. So the concept's pretty cool. I mean, the attack is cool. The scripts that were released are old and they're clunky and they're good for proof of concept, but they don't really work in terms of creating a good example or a good screenshot for a report or actually conducting the attack. So, burp really makes that easy for us. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is identifying differences in sitemaps when they change. So here is used Z-Attack proxy before. Shame on you. I'm just kidding. All right. Z-Attack proxy is okay for some things, right? Certainly is usable in certain circumstances. One thing it does that burp doesn't, and like, wow, right? Zap does something burp doesn't, is when you spider something with Zap, the things that it finds that the user didn't already map, it puts a little spider next to it. And that's like incredibly helpful to me because as someone that does manual testing, when I see a difference, when I see that my mapper or my spider finds something that I didn't find manually, I want to go back and look at it, right? I want to go back and manually look at that page and see it with my own eyes and begin to process anything that's there that's important to me. But burp doesn't give us that capability, so I was teaching my class a year or two ago, and one of the students said, well, why don't you just do this? And this was his wonderful plan here moving forward. We'll highlight the state of our target beforehand. We'll make some changes, then we'll go back and look at the items that weren't highlighted. And I was like, that is brilliant. I'm using that for now on, and I'm going to tell the world about it. So this is my opportunity to do that. All right, so what does that look like? If we want to like let the spider go and crawl the rest of this application, if we go into our target tab, sitemap, and then highlight our target, we have, and I'm going to actually go in here and only show only highlighted items. Yeah, let's not do that. No, this is fine. Okay. Down here, I have all the stuff that burp has requested, right? Or that burp has seen. Now, some of these are light gray, and I actually want to filter those out, and I thought I could. No, I can, right? There it is. Show only requested items. Look, you guys are teaching me something here. Okay, so I just want to show only requested items. These are the things that I've explicitly visited. Now I can right-click, or I can select all of these, right-click, highlight, and just highlight them as a specific color. Come on. And this time I'll do it red. And then go back over to my spider here, and I can say, and let me make sure I'm logged in, because that would work better here, and I am. I can say, go at it, spider, okay? And then I can decide whether to ignore these or submit these. There's reasons for one way or the other, but the bottom line is I want to be able to go back here and see all the stuff that the spider found that I wasn't aware of, okay? Or that I didn't manually find, and then I can go and look at those manually, analyze those, and so on and so forth, okay? So it gives me a good view of the things that spider found that I didn't. And I find that incredibly useful as a penetration tester. Okay, let me go ahead and unhighlight all these. I use highlight for all kinds of fancy stuff. Okay, so burp's good at a whole lot of things, right? And in fact, because of its extender, because of the burp extender, it can pretty much do everything, but it can't do everything organically, right? Sometimes we just need to be able to extend the functionality to do something. And in that particular case, we end up writing an extension, but we don't write in Java, right? We do not write things in Java, and if you know me, I don't write things in Java. I avoid it like the plague, okay? Python's my thing. You know, I can't get through a talk without Python, and guess what? You're going to see some Python. Okay, so I can't get through a talk without talking about some Python. And I could write an extension in Python, right, or using that particular capability in burp. But someone, and I can't remember his name, it escapes me. If you're here, just shout it out there. But someone built this Python scripter extension, which does all the heavy lifting for us, the Java integrations and all that, and then just exposes the parts of burp that are important to us so that we can literally, inside of burp, just open up a script tab, write some Python, and it applies to the requests and responses from the different tools that we identify. Really, really fantastic, okay? Problem is, there's no documentation on this anywhere. Has anybody tried to use it before? Good, you're going to learn something because I've only got like 2 hands that showed up there. All right, so yeah, I mean, there's no documentation on it. There's like one sample script sitting out on the internet somewhere, and then there's the source code for the actual extension itself. And that was where I went to try to figure out what exactly was going on. But I'm here to tell you, help is on the way, folks. All right? So the first thing is this idea of introspection, which is where we can use some built-in functions inside Python to see what kind of objects and stuff are available to us. All right, and so I wrote this particular script here, and the way that it works is you can just copy it, and I'll show you where all these things are at on the internet at some point. You can just copy it. We can go over here, and if you didn't notice the little script tag, there it is, and you have just a blank canvas. We paste it in there, and I'll explain a little bit more about what these different things mean in a minute when they actually matter. But in this particular case, all I want to do is print out all the things that are available to me, all the things that are exposed through this burp scripter interface. So I'm just going to go to repeater and generate a request here. And if I go to extender and I look in Python scripter's output, which is going to be really small in this resolution. Okay, fine, don't scroll down. All right, you have all this information down in here. For those of you that don't use the Python interpreter, this is probably like Greek to you. Come on, scroll up, please. All right, well, it's going to fight me. All right, so there's a whole lot of stuff down in there, but those of you that do use Python, that's pretty familiar to you. That's the dir command showing you all the different methods and properties that are exposed by the different objects that it gives us. And so you can print things out, you can add to this particular script to print out other variable values and stuff like that to kind of figure out where you're at and what you're dealing with, and then build your scripts off of that. So that's like the very first step in documenting what exactly this Python scripter module does, and I plan on expanding that at some point to something that's readable, like on GitHub or something. So keep an eye on my Twitter, and that'll come out eventually. Okay? But that's not super useful. What's super useful is how we apply this practically in our daily jobs. And so the first thing that I want to show you is how we can create custom passive scanning checks using this Python scripter extender. So autocomplete right, not a real big deal. In fact, password fields don't even allow it anymore. So when burp triggers on that, you look at it and you're like, it doesn't even matter because browsers don't actually autocomplete on password fields anymore. But what about text fields with social security numbers in them, or credit card numbers, or some sort of other account number or sensitive information? I check for those personally. So I just wrote a really quick regex that will parse out any input field that it sees that's of type text, and then just create an issue within my issues tab, so that I can see whenever I come across one of those during my mapping, and go back and visit those and see if the name of any of those fields are something sensitive, because those are the things that I want to trigger on. Okay, and so you can see here that I'm importing something called custom issue from Python scripter utils. That's another thing I'll provide you, and Burp makes it really, really easy for you to add these libraries to your Python path and then just load custom stuff, and I'll provide you all that information. But let me show you how this works real quickly. First, it checks whether or not it's a request. In this particular case, not is request means it's not a request, it's a response. And then you can actually specify the tool that you want to focus on. In this particular case, I'm focusing on the proxy. And then I can check if it's in scope, right, in that third if condition. And then if it is, then I do my magic. I just conduct my regex, I parse some things out, and then I create my issue. So to kind of show you how this works, if I take this and I copy it, go up to my script, paste it in, and then just go to somewhere in the application that has that. Actually, first I'll show you where in issues I only have the password field with autocomplete enabled, right? But I don't have anything about any other form fields such as username or anything else. But if I just visit something that does have those form fields like messages, here's a form field, I can go back here and I see text field with autocomplete enabled. So I have this custom issue here that will get printed out with Burp's exported report, which is nice. But I can also very quickly go through and actually look at what was parsed out and determine whether or not it's a sensitive field that I need to revisit. That's just like one example, okay? If you look at the script here, notice how I kind of put a line break and then I just have a comment there. You could literally just create a bunch of your own passive scanning checks using regexes and then just have that in your script. And as you're mapping the application, Burp's going to be watching for all that stuff and creating issues for you in the issue tracker. So that was pretty darn handy for me. I mean, rather than writing a whole extension, like a passive scanner extension, bam, I can just use Python, which is natural for me, to extend this functionality, which is pretty awesome. Okay? The next thing is Regex Extractor. So kind of sort of similar to what we were doing, but the purpose is a little bit different. So remember earlier when I was showing you the demo about using the grep extract rules, I said there were some limitations there. Well, the limitation is when you create one of those grep extract rules, if there's like 5 matches for that rule within the page, within the response, it's still only going to give you the first one in that particular output. And that's a problem. Because there have been times, and I'll show you a place in the application here, this one right here, where what do I have on the page? I have actual display names, but I also have usernames here, right? And I may want to extract all those usernames from this particular page. I also have pagination, okay? And here I only have 2 pages, 0 and 1. But what if there was like 60 pages of comments or messages, and each one of those pages had 30 different users that had posted on it, and I want to extract all those usernames? Well, the grep extract rule is only going to give me the first one, and I'll kind of show you that right here. So let's go in, proxy, history, find where I went there, which was there, send that over to Intruder, and here my position that I want to fuzz is my pages. I want to go through all the different pages. So let me mark that, go to payloads. My payload is obviously 0 and 1 because I know otherwise if I had a whole bunch of them, I would probably want to use the numbers payload type and then just go through a whole bunch of numbers. But this particular case is pretty simple. Hit start. It goes through, minimizes the window, and makes it real annoying. You better work. Okay. There we go. And then if I go over to options and I extract like I did before, I want to go back and I want to pull out those usernames. So I scroll down to where the usernames are at, and I highlight them, and I hit OK, and I go back to results, and I've only got 1. Okay, that looks like it didn't. Something got goofed up there, didn't it? Did I miss something? Yes, I did. Yeah, I missed a little bit there, and I worked it up real good that time. All right. I'll get it right eventually. Like, I got this presentation's way too long to mess up this much. Actually, that was right, wasn't it? No, I missed the 1. Yeah, I did. Okay. So did that make it better, maybe? Not really? What happened there? Maybe that'll help. There we go. Ah, yeah, there it works. Okay. So, but we only see 1, right? We want all 5. Okay, so what this particular rule does is it replicates that behavior, but it finds all matches for me. So I can take this, I can copy it, paste it into my scripts here, go back to my intruder window, replay the attack, and it minimizes it, but I don't really care at this point. Go to extender, and in my output, all the way at the bottom now, okay, come on, let me say that again. Yeah, I do. That's a fantastic idea. Okay, so going back to this, I need to actually take the regex that I created, right? Which is this right here. Update the script. Now if I replay the attack, I'm going to be like searching for Windows all night as I try to fix this computer. All right, there we go. And you see all of them are extracted there, okay? So a pretty simple example, but that's actually come in play quite a bit for me. Okay. I know you're just clapping to be nice. Like I struggled through that demo, right? That demo was a struggle. All right, the struggle is real. All right, so there's that. And how am I doing on time? I'm wasting time by looking at it. I got time. Good deal. Okay, so the last piece I want to show you is this other idea that we can bypass client-side anti-automation with it, right? So some additional functionality. So in PwnHub, we have this thing where it's this kind of bot detection. It's using client-side anti-automation controls where it takes some information from the server and then it just does something with JavaScript, some proprietary algorithm with JavaScript, and then sends that information back to the server to prevent anything but a browser from being able to conduct an automated attack. Now, for those of us that are savvy, we can just kind of replicate, we can look up that information and replicate that in a Python script and then conduct that attack somewhere else. But I want to do it inside of Burp, okay? So in this particular case, I'm going to go type in my username, make sure I've got a bad password, hit OK, right? That's how we've primed Burp, right, for our attack. And then we want to conduct an authentication attack with Burp. So if I go to my proxy history, let's find that request, which was right here. right-click it, send it over to Intruder. In my positions, I'm only concerned about the password. So we hit OK there, and in my payloads, we'll just create a list of passwords, and it'll be just something, something else, the actual password, something else, okay? I got really, really lucky here. And then we start the attack, okay? We start the attack. You guys watch me fumble around and burp again. And we see here that it didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work is if we look at the response, we got this bot detected because there's this client-side control in there preventing us from automating an attack against it. Well, what I can do is I can go back to that initial, the initial request in here for the login page. All right, come on. Look at the response. We can scroll down here to the JavaScript, and there's a good bit of it there. But by and large, what it does here is it takes a nonce from a hidden value, then it takes the provided password, it puts them together, it MD5 hashes them, assigns it to a token, and sends it back, okay? That's what it does. Well, we can replicate that behavior using Python Scripter on the fly to do this during our attack and bypass the client-side control. And that's basically what this does. We take the nonce, we parse it out, we parse out the password, we replicate the algorithm, then we add that token back to the request and pass it along its merry way. Copy this, send it to our script here. All right. Now the script is in place. I'm going to actually just close some of these so I stop getting confused. I'm going to actually intercept this so that I have the proper nonce for my first attack. Okay, it's intercepted. That's the one I want to send over to Intruder. I'll go through the same configuration, clear those out. Just want to attack the password. Go to my payloads. Something else. Password, something else, and something else. And then we start the attack. And if the... Oh my gosh, come on. Was this the right attack? Oh, and if the demo guys love me, which they do today, I see there that when I do hit the correct password, now I get properly redirected back over to home because I've successfully authenticated and I've bypassed the client-side control. Okay? Once again, 20, 30 lines of Python code inside this extender, and we've replicated a bunch of logic that would have normally cost us quite a bit more outside of Burp, and we wouldn't have had all of Burp's wonderful functionality to help us along the way. All right? So that's the last example for Python Scripter that I wanted to show you. I find it super helpful and awesome. And those are just 3 examples, but I would guarantee a lot of you are sitting back there right now going, oh my gosh, I could have used this to do the X or used this to do Y on a recent pen test. And in that particular case, now you have an option. So a couple of things here, the goods. /Burp visual aids on my website is where I have a lot of some of the simpler ones, like the unintended, the SSL stripping and the grep rules. And some just like, I think there's like 8 or 10 different neat tricks that are just really short snippets of information on how to use Burp. I expand that whenever I come across something new. And then lanmaster53 at gist.github.com. I'm going to make that public as soon as I get to a computer and or a reliable internet connection. I can make that public. I'll make it public, and that's where you'll have all of the stuff that we just covered, those payloads, and you can build off of those, expand on them, do with those what you will, completely open source. And then those other resources are the 2 places where when I started writing this stuff out, I went and tried to and used those 2 resources to begin to learn about how exactly to approach the Python Scripter extension. Okay? I think we may have a little bit of time for questions, but I'm going to give you a quick sales pitch. All right, I do consulting, I do development work. I also do training in PWAPT. I've got a class in Boston in 2 weeks if any of you are all of a sudden interested. Because I do a lot of this kind of stuff and more in that particular class. We focus heavily on Burp. Then, of course, I got my website. Upcoming classes are posted there if you're interested, and I've got some other projects there as well. But at this time, I'll go ahead and take any questions that you guys might have. Any questions at all? I know some of you asked them as we went along, but yes, sir. Right? Okay, so his question was, when you're doing the burp intruder stuff, is there any way to kind of flip the insertion points? I've never ran into an instance where I needed to flip them, but there are 4 different attack types. Are you familiar with the attack types? Okay, and so for like the authentication attack, when you need to do all permutations, you do something like battering ram, right, where it'll do all usernames and passwords. So I don't think I've ran into a use case where I've needed it to do one before the other. So I'm not exactly sure. But that's something that if you shoot me an email and we can talk through a specific scenario, I may be able to either come up with one or, if nothing else, submit a feature request. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Oh, I just had somebody ask me that question in a talk last week, and I gave him a really lame answer. My lame answer for him was, oh, sorry about that. Yeah, the question was, so like if you're testing mobile apps or a web application that's using certificate pinning, is there any good way to get around that? So I do a lot of white box testing, and literally my solution for that is, hey developer, can you roll me one that doesn't pin certificates? Right? That's a really bad answer to the question. I understand that, but it is often my first like way to tackle that problem. The other one, and I don't do a ton of mobile testing myself personally, but I do know there are some ways to, when you obviously have a rooted device or a jailbroken device, there are some ways where you can bypass it using certain tools and stuff. I don't know any of them off the top of my head. A lot of my consultants, I know, tackle that problem quite often, though. I think it's easier on Android than it is on iOS, though. iOS is a serious headache when it comes to that. All right, any other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. So his question was, do you know of any good way to work with WebSockets in Burp? And other than just what's currently there to view WebSockets, no, I've not encountered it. In fact, that's a question I get quite a lot. Luckily, I've not had to encounter it too much. When I do, I typically step out of the interception proxy to deal with that. Try to invoke those through some sort of other script that I can manipulate, but it's never easy. Zap is like one of the only places where you can go and actually interact with the WebSocket as an interception proxy. So yeah, unfortunately, Burp doesn't have that problem solved yet. Probably because they don't necessarily see it as that big of a problem. But otherwise, I don't know for sure why. Right? Yeah. Yeah, until you're the one testing the app with a WebSocket, and then you're like, crap, I would be the one, right? All right, any other questions? Yes, sir. So natively, no, but there is an extension, and like the tagline on the repo is "everything Burp should be but isn't," and I cannot remember what the name of it is. Does anybody remember? It's not XSS Validator, but I think it may do some JavaScript stuff. In fact, John Pullen, one of my former consultants, actually wrote that extension, and I believe it actually does some of that. But there is, I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, it actually uses Chromium right there inside Burp, and it will do some it'll do some JavaScript stuff. I can't remember the name of it either, but it's like if you I don't want to tell you to go Google it because that's such a sucky answer. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but there is an extension that integrates Chromium with Burp and allows you to do some of that client-side processing of JavaScript. No, it's not. It's very hefty, and I think it has some dependencies like Selenium or something like that. So, no, not Selenium. It would be Chrome or something like that. Yeah, it's definitely not something they have in the B App Store. We done? Okay. Yeah, I'll be hanging out for a little bit. I am heading out this evening because I got to get back for something tomorrow, but I'll be hanging out for a little bit if you got any more questions. All right. Thank you. Hey, how's it going? No, it's like every year I miss it now, but